I never thought I'd have to choose between my marriage and my sister's memory until my mother-in-law, Linda, made that decision for me. The painting had been hanging in our living room for 3 years, the final piece my sister Kate created before cancer took her at 29. It wasn't just art, it was the last piece of her I had left. The day everything fell apart was supposed to be a celebration. My daughter Emma was turning 10, and despite my reservations, my husband James had insisted on having the party at our house. "Mom's been better lately," Kate said, his eyes pleading. "She's even been seeing that therapist we suggested." I should have trusted my instincts. The party started normally enough. Our house was filled with the chaos of excited 10-year-olds, the scent of chocolate cake, and the sound of popping balloons. Linda arrived last, as usual, making her grand entrance with an enormous gift that made all the other presents look insignificant. "Where's my precious granddaughter?" she announced, completely ignoring me as she swept past. 3 years of marriage to her son, and I was still invisible unless she needed a target. I stayed in the kitchen, arranging cupcakes and trying to maintain the peace we carefully constructed over the past few months. Since Kate's death, the painting had been a point of contention. Linda had never approved of it hanging in her son's living room, as she liked to remind me. But James had supported my decision to keep it there, understanding it was my way of keeping Kate's memory alive. The first sign of trouble came when I heard Linda's voice rise above the children's chatter. "Emma, sweetheart, wouldn't you prefer if Grandma got you a beautiful landscape painting for this wall? Something more appropriate?" My hands froze over the cupcakes. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see Emma looking uncertainly between her grandmother and the abstract swirls of blues and purples that Kate had poured her heart into during her final days. "But Aunt Kate made that for Mommy," Emma said softly. "It's special." I saw the familiar tightening of Linda's jaw, the look she got when someone challenged her authority. "Special?" she scoffed. "It looks like something a child would make. You're old enough now to understand that some things are better left in the past." James was outside with the other parents, manning the grill. I should have called him in, should have seen what was coming. But years of dealing with Linda had taught me to pick my battles, and I foolishly thought she wouldn't make a scene at her granddaughter's birthday party. I was wrong. It happened in slow motion. Linda reached for the painting, her manicured nails gripping the frame. "Let me just move this somewhere more suitable." "Linda," I warned, finally stepping out of the kitchen. "Please don't touch that." She turned to me, her eyes glinting with something I'd seen too many times before. "This is my son's house too, Sarah, and I'm tired of seeing this eyesore every time I visit. Kate is gone. It's time you accepted that and stopped forcing her memory on my family." Before I could reach her, she yanked the painting from the wall. The frame cracked, the canvas tore, and 3 years of carefully maintained peace shattered along with it. The children fell silent. Emma's friends stared wide-eyed at the adults, sensing the tension that suddenly filled the room. Emma herself began to cry softly, and her best friend Amy put an arm around her shoulders. I stood there, looking at my sister's last creation lying broken on the floor, and something inside me broke too, but not in the way Linda expected. "Everyone," I said, my voice surprisingly steady as I pulled out my phone. "I think it's time for a little intermission. Kids, why don't you all head to the backyard? I believe Daddy's got the ice cream ready." The children didn't need to be told twice, filing out quickly, leaving me alone with Linda and a few hovering mothers who were too curious to leave. "Since you've decided to make this moment about you, Linda," I continued, scrolling through my phone, "let's really make it about you. Let's play the voicemail you left me last week when James was working late." Linda's face, which had been set in righteous indignation, suddenly paled. "You wouldn't dare." "You see," I addressed the remaining adults, "Linda's been seeing a therapist, as she's told everyone. But she forgot to mention why. James thinks it's because she's working on her anger issues, but this voicemail tells a different story." "Sarah," Linda's voice shook slightly, "think about what you're doing." I pressed play, and Linda's voice filled the room. "Listen here, you little witch. I know what you're doing, keeping that hideous painting up. You think you can keep manipulating my son with your dead sister's memory? I've seen women like you before, using tragedy to control good men. I'm warning you, either that painting comes down, or I'll make sure James knows the real you. That's been poisoning his daughter against me, turning my own granddaughter into a memorial for your sister instead of letting her be a Matthews. Your sister was nothing to this family, and the sooner you accept that, the better for everyone." The silence that followed was deafening. Through the patio doors, I could see James heading in, probably wondering where everyone had gone. He had no idea his mother had been threatening me for months, trying to erase every trace of Kate from our lives. "There's more," I said quietly, my finger hovering over the play button again. Would anyone like to hear what else Linda's been saying about my dead sister? The mothers who had stayed to watch the drama unfold were now backing away, shooting Linda looks that mixed horror with fascination. And Linda, who had terrorized me for 3 years, who had tried to erase my sister's memory, who had just destroyed the last piece of art Kate had created, finally looked afraid. The sound of the patio door sliding open made us all turn. James stood there, confusion etched on his face as he took in the broken painting, his mother's pale face, and my phone still held out like a weapon. "What's going on?" he asked, his eyes fixing on the torn canvas. "What happened to Kate's painting?" Linda stepped forward, already shifting into victim mode. "James, sweetheart, your wife is trying to cause trouble again. I was just trying to help make the house more presentable for Emma's party. And she—" I pressed play again, letting Linda's own words cut off her lies. The color drained from James's face as his mother's venomous words filled the room for the second time. I watched as his eyes moved from the phone to the shattered painting, then to his mother, who stood frozen like a statue in designer clothes. "Mom," his voice was barely a whisper. "How could you?" Linda's demeanor shifted instantly, tears welling up in her expertly made-up eyes. "Darling, you don't understand. I was just trying to protect our family. This obsession with her sister isn't healthy. Emma needs to grow up in a normal home, not a shrine to—" "A shrine?" I cut in, my voice sharp. "One painting, Linda. One painting of my sister who fought cancer for 2 years, who spent her last days creating this for us, for Emma, so she have something to remember her aunt by." "There are more recordings," I continued, watching Linda's face contort. "Would you like to hear the one where you told me I was tainting the Matthews bloodline by teaching Emma about art, just like my worthless sister? Or maybe the one where you threatened to contest our custody if I didn't start raising Emma properly?" James stepped forward, his hands shaking. "Contest custody? Mom, what is Sarah talking about?" The remaining party guests were inching toward the door, sensing this had moved beyond casual drama into something far more serious. Through the window, I could see Emma and her friends being entertained by one of the other mothers, thankfully distracted from the implosion happening inside. Linda straightened her spine, years of social conditioning taking over. "James, darling, your wife is clearly unstable. I've been trying to tell you this for years. The way she clings to her sister's memory, the way she's influencing Emma. I was only trying to protect my granddaughter. By threatening my wife," James's voice rose, "by destroying the last thing Kate created before she died." "Oh please," Linda scoffed, her mask finally cracking. "That girl was nothing but trouble from the start. Do you know she had the audacity to refuse my offer?" The room fell silent. "What offer?" James asked. I felt my heart stop. This was something even I hadn't known about. Linda's eyes widened, realizing her mistake, but it was too late now. "Mom," James's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. "What offer?" Linda's hands fluttered to her pearl necklace, her nervous tell. It was nothing. Just a small matter between Kate and me before. "Tell him, Linda," I said, my voice steady despite the roaring in my ears. "Tell him what you did, or I'll call Kate's best friend Claire. I'm sure she'd love to share what Kate told her." The mention of Claire's name made Linda flinch. She looked around the room like a cornered animal, but there was nowhere to hide anymore. "Fine," she spat. "You want to know?" I offered to pay for her experimental treatment. James sucked in a breath. "Mom, that's actually kind off." In exchange, Linda continued, her voice hardening, "she had to convince Sarah to break up with you." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the distant sounds of children playing seemed muted. "You?" James struggled to form words. "You tried to bribe my dying sister-in-law to break up my marriage. It was for your own good." Linda's voice rose hysterically. I could see where this was heading. She jabbed a finger at me, was just like her sister. All that artistic nonsense, no respect for family traditions. I knew she'd never fit into our world properly. And look, I was right. She's turned my only granddaughter into into what, Mom? James's voice was deadly quiet. Into someone who appreciates art? Who remembers her aunt? Who knows how to love without conditions? But Kate refused, I said softly, pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. She refused, and that's why you've hated me even more since she died. Because she chose her sister's happiness over her own treatment. Linda's silence was all the confirmation we needed. How much? James asked. What? How much did you offer my dying sister-in-law to destroy my marriage? Linda lifted her chin. $200,000. The full cost of the experimental treatment in Sweden. James staggered back as if he'd been physically struck. 200. Mom, that treatment might have saved her life. Exactly. Linda exclaimed, seemingly missing the horror in her son's voice. It was more than generous. But she refused. Said she'd rather die knowing her sister was happy than live knowing she'd ruined her life. Stupid, emotional girl. I felt my knees give way, sinking into the nearest chair. All this time, I thought Kate had turned down the treatment because she was tired of fighting, because she'd made peace with her fate. I never knew she'd been offered a chance, a real chance, and turned it down for me. The weight of that love, that sacrifice, crashed over me just as Emma came running in from the backyard. Mommy, when can we do cake? She stopped short, taking in the scene. Her eyes fell to the broken painting on the floor. Aunt Kate's painting. What happened? The party had been completely derailed, the cake forgotten. The celebrations overshadowed by decades of manipulation finally coming to light. But looking at my daughter's face, so much like Kate's sometimes it hurt, I knew exactly what my sister would want me to do. You know what, sweetie? Let's do cake right now. I stood up, smoothing my dress. Your Aunt Kate always said that even the darkest moments need a little sweetness. Mom, James said, warning in his voice as Linda stepped toward Emma. Don't worry, I said, picking up the pieces of the broken frame. I think it's time Linda left. After all, she's got a therapy appointment to get to, doesn't she? Though she might want to start being honest with her therapist about why she's really there. The weeks following Emma's birthday party felt like living in the aftermath of a storm. James barely spoke to his mother, despite her daily attempts to call and text. She even sent flowers to my office, roses, not lilies, proving she hadn't bothered to learn that lilies were Kate's favorite, even after all these years. The painting of damage wasn't completely destroyed. I found a restoration artist who specialized in contemporary pieces, and while she couldn't make it perfect, she could repair most of the damage. Art carries memories, she told me as she worked. Sometimes the scars become part of the story. It was during the third week after the party that Claire, Kate's best friend, came to visit. She brought with her a small wooden box I'd never seen before. Kate left this with me, she explained, setting it on our kitchen table. She made me promise to wait until the right time to give it to you. After what happened at Emma's party, I think this is the time she was waiting for. Inside the box were letters, dozens of them, and a small USB drive. But what caught my eye was an envelope on top with Linda's name written in Kate's flowing script. She wrote to Linda. I whispered. Claire nodded. The day after she refused the offer, she asked me to hold on to everything until you needed it most, until the truth about Linda needed to come out. That evening, after Emma went to bed, James and I sat down to read through Kate's letters. There were letters to me, to James, to Emma for various birthdays she knew she'd miss. But it was Linda's letter that we read first. Dear Linda, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I want you to know that I forgive you for trying to use my illness as leverage. I understand that in your mind, you were protecting your son. But what you fail to see is that Sarah is not someone he needs protection from. You see love as a transaction, something to be earned through proper behavior and social standing. But real love, the kind my sister gives, doesn't come with conditions or price tags. I'm choosing to die on my own terms, knowing my sister is with someone who loves her, rather than live knowing I destroyed her happiness. That's not weakness, Linda. That's the kind of strength you've never understood. I've left evidence of our conversation, of your offer, in safekeeping. I hope it never needs to be used. I hope you learn to see that expanding your family through Sarah hasn't weakened it. It's made it stronger in ways you can't measure with social status or bank accounts. But if you continue to hurt my sister, if you keep trying to erase me from Emma's life, then you'll leave them no choice but to show everyone who you really are. The choice, as always, is yours. With hope for change, Kate. James set down the letter, tears streaming down his face. She knew, he whispered. She knew Mom would never stop, so she left us protection. The USB drive contained recordings of Linda's offer, backed up emails, everything needed to prove what she'd done. Kate had thought of everything. The next day, we invited Linda over. She arrived clutching her designer handbag like a shield, her face set in practiced remorse. Before you say anything, I held up Kate's letter. You should read this. We watched as she read, her hands trembling slightly. When she finished, she looked older, somehow smaller. She forgave me, Linda whispered. Even after what I did, she forgave me. Kate was like that, I said softly. She saw the best in people, even when they were at their worst. It's what made her art so beautiful. She could find light in the darkest places. I've been seeing my therapist twice a week now, Linda said, her voice unusually vulnerable. Really seeing her, really talking. I think I need help. James took his mother's hand. That's a start, Mom. We didn't forgive Linda that day. Trust, like art restoration, takes time and careful work. But we did hang Kate's restored painting back in the living room. The slight cracks in the canvas, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look, told a story of destruction and healing. A month later, Linda brought over a box of her own. Inside were photos, dozens of them, of Kate at family events I hadn't even known she'd attended. Pictures of her with Emma as a baby, at family dinners, candid shots of her painting. I tried to erase her, Linda admitted. But maybe instead I could help keep her memory alive. For Emma, it wasn't a perfect ending. Real life rarely has those. But as I watched Linda sit with Emma, telling her stories about her Aunt Kate that even I hadn't heard, I thought about what Kate had written. Love shouldn't come with conditions, and sometimes the most damaged pieces of our lives can be restored, even if the scars remain visible. The painting hangs in our living room to this day. When the light hits it just right, you can see the places where it was broken and mended. Like our family, it's not perfect, but it's stronger for having been repaired. And somewhere, I like to think Kate is smiling, knowing that her last gift to us wasn't just the painting, it was the truth that finally set us all free.